so you kind of know what's going on. I'm going to show you how to set up a simple project and a couple tricks that I think you'll find useful in general. So, first of all, clear. So we've got a nice little project folder. There's nothing in it. I'm going to say to generate a new app, like we use Cornelian in Sinatra, in Rails we use Rails. And like it's going to be a theme in Rails that for stuff in Rails we use Rails. There's nothing else, right? It comes with batteries included. So Rails new, and you give it a name. I suggest we should build a shop with terrains in it. So terrain shop. No, it's my brand name. It's registered. It's not a misspelling if it's a startup name. Also, consonants suck. No, sorry, vowels suck. So I work for a company, a delivery company. It was called Swished. So like, is it spelled like that? I don't even know, but yeah, eBay. Shame on them for having an E in it, an A. Oh, that's why EA is so shitty. Because that's all right. Anyway. So that's how you boot up a Rails project. You see, I've just said Rails new, name of the application, and here it is. So you can see it's been generated. There's plenty of stuff, way more than you're used to seeing. Obviously, what's the most important bits are the app, which is models, views, and controllers. Plenty other stuff that you should not care about, nor you will need to succeed in this module. Because that generates production-ready scaffolding. And production-ready, I mean, like, it assumes you do way more than just, like, learning about it. So, but also I think you should see all of it. We should not strip off these things so you are aware, at least, of the scope of what's there. But I also think it's redundant if you go around and start poking, like right now, at least, right? Feel free to experiment. But you don't need all of it. That's the attitude. Also, it's a picture of Sputnik. Unrelated. Yeah, I had to Google it. Like, I forgot how it looked like. So the best and the best website on the internet from now on will be this little website, which is called Rails Guides. I think I've mentioned it when I was talking about active records in like previous module. Now, for realsies, this is like super important because Rails, as I said earlier today, it's just a bunch of Ruby, and by a bunch of Ruby I mean probably, I don't want to exaggerate, but I'd say maybe 100,000 lines of Ruby, maybe less, maybe more. I don't know. A lot of Ruby that's already written for us, and it gives us extra functionality. But you don't know it if you don't know it, right? You just have to learn it. You have to know how to do things in Rails in order to achieve them. Sinatra was very manual. Rails will be less manual, but that comes with a price. You have to memorize it, right? And by memorize it, I don't mean you have to actually memorize it, but you have to memorize it enough so you know what to Google for when you want to do things. And that's why we teach you Sinatra, because if you only learned Rails, you'd have no idea how HTML and like any kind of web servers work, because it takes away so much work out of your hands. So that's why Sinatra was important. So Rails guides for anything. Please bookmark this, set it to your homepage, and use it extensively. Remember when we wanted the model, there's a thing. Stop, revert. Who knows Harry Potter in general? Who's like into it? All right, so there are forbidden spells, right? There's 3 of them, right? Cruciate. Anyway, one of them kills, the second one touches, and the third one probably votes for Trump. I forgot the third. But like, you should not ever use them or you get kicked out of Hogwarts. With Rails, there's one thing that is also a forbidden spell that you should not ever use in this bootcamp, and that's Rails G scaffold. Because that essentially builds up everything. So like you don't have to have any knowledge to build a full RESTful model view control situation for a resource. You just say this, you say what you want, what kind of properties it has, it does everything. And I mean it, like migrations, views, models, controllers, it just is there, right? This is, as I mentioned previously, this is alongside the philosophy of Rails. It takes away all this like plumbing away from you, so you can focus on being creative and building business logic rather than plumbing, right? No one wants to do plumbing all the time. But there are spells that are less forbidden that I'll actually condone of using, like Rails generate model. So why create models by hand? So I can say Rails G model train, because we're going to do trains, right? And what trains do? Trains have names, and because this is a string, I can say string, and maybe trains also should have prices since we sell them. Price, integer, and that's all I have to say. But also there's a nice little caveat that if something is a string, you need not mention the data type. So you just say name, price, integer, press enter. I think I've done something wrong. Oh yeah, I'm not in the app directory, so I have to go to train shop and now run this. This one is fine, because all it does, if you look at it, it gives you the migration file, right? And the model, nothing else. I mean, we create them anyway, so we already were creating the migration files using a command, but now we go a step further. Now the model gets created for us. So models, train, that's all there is, right? But we don't have to type it, don't have to create the file. And the migration is here for what to put there. And you see, it has a name and an integer of price. That's what I said in here. It has to have a name and the price, that's an integer. It's a shorthand. That's all. What you will notice that you don't see yet, because there's an application controller, but in Sinatra it was full of stuff already by default, because it had to handle these like basic things. Just so happens in Rails there's no such thing. All because in Sinatra the connection between what kind of HTTP verb on which route was handled in the controller. The controller had all of these like get to this thing should do that, right? Now we're going to do it differently. We're going to have, where is it? Here, I think. Yeah, in the config folder, there's a file called routes, and I've said that. I say routes. Sue me. Did I explain why? I think I did with Sinatra. Yeah. So routes in Rails live in that folder. We're going to use them extensively. For now, the default are empty. What's interesting is that there's a note left for us from the developer of Rails, or developers, should I say, for details on the DSL available within this file. DSL, domain-specific language, so like the goodies, right, that we get. C, guides, Ruby on Rails / routing. So once again, even Rails itself reminds us that's where we should be going to understand anything, right? And that's a nice little... I mean, you don't have to understand everything, but this essentially covers all the cases you could ever like encounter. So this is good, because that's essentially, if you have any questions, that they have been answered here with examples. So this is where we're going to put routing. Routing has been separated from the controller, which is a great idea, by the way. I'll show you that in practice in a second. So routes now live here. Templating names is a bit different, so we don't anymore say ERB. We have to prefix that with HTML. Cosmetic change, just remember about it. The templating language will be the same. That's still ERB. Nothing changes. Sorry, I've lost my way. And previously, we've been doing the actual A tags for links. And this is the weird stuff. This is the beginning of the kind of weird Railsy magic. I'll show you that in the practice in a second. But there's a helper that the first... I see that link to helper as the first introduction, the first step, the introduction to how much Rails does for you. You'll be like mind blown once I show you how this like knows so much about what you want to do. Did we do like rake routes in Sinatra? I don't think. Yeah, because like from my just personal viewpoint of like how much of Sinatra and Rails I do interchangeably every module. I forget what's where. Also, by the way, the thing that I failed to like run when we destroy stuff, Paolo approached me later on. This is a Rails thing. Like this doesn't exist in Sinatra. So like the dependent object, if something has children, you should not kill the parent without killing all the children. You should do both. So first you get rid of the children, then you can get rid of the parent. And that's not a dark humor joke. That's actual computer science preferences. That's children and parents. Yeah, I could have said associated objects, but it's way less gory. And I just discovered that if I mention killing children, you all laugh. I don't know what I'm going to do with that information. Why am I going on that diversion? Yes, helpers. No, routes. So, as I said, we're not going to use any other tool but Rails. So from now on, anything we do in terms of server management, database operations, console, whatnot, just Rails. So Rails has everything baked into it. Little do you know yet that it's all the same as previously. There's actually like rake stuff, and there's Active Record, and there's rack. Like everything here is just baked into Rails. Rails is not it's packaging on top of everything you've learned so far. So if I say Rails routes, it actually is nice enough to list all the routes that we have and which controllers take care of it. These are system routes for Rails. We don't need to know and understand them, but I will show you that once we start defining routes for ourselves, that they'll be listed here. These are not important for our purposes. So, a couple of things, some housekeeping. If I go to any folder, by the way, I don't know if you know, if you just type in CD, you go to your home directory, which in my case would be users Daniel Kaczmarczyk. If you go to C, just press CD on your computer, you're going to go to users forward your name. If I say now Rails-V, I'm going to get the global version of Rails, whatever is installed on my computer. You should have something like that. God forbid, sorry, politically correct, God of your choice forbid, that it's less than 5. It should be 5.
Some of the things are 4 point something.
Yeah, and some of the Rails labs will be in Rails 4. That's not a big problem, right? As long as your global Rails version is 5.18 or upwards, right? Because labs will be in Rails 4, you will have the opportunity to experience an older version and see what the differences are. They will mostly be cosmetic, plus Rails guides will always give you the ability to select the version of Rails and like look at how the different things work for different versions. So like that's not a problem. What I'm saying is that your global version, I went to my home directory so that I'm not in a project folder, because should you say Rails-V in a folder that has a gem file in it, and within that gem file there will be a specified version of Rails, it's going to say that specified version of Rails. So if you go to a lab folder and say Rails-V, whatever the gem file says, which may be 4 point something something, it's going to say that. Okay, so make sure that your computer has 5.2, because the code challenge will be in 5, and I suggest you learn 5. But if you go out into the wild and to the real world, you're going to see that people, like it's often that people have software that's not the newest version, because upgrading software often comes with a great cost in development time. So it sometimes pays off just not to upgrade, as long as the security is still in check, and just stay on the older version. So that's not like if you think, oh, labs are in the old version, like that's not how we do it. Well, yeah. my cousin works for a bank in Poland. They use a version of Java, so a programming language, from 7 years ago. I laugh about that every night because I feel so sorry for him. But also I like when he suffers because he's my cousin, so that's what we do. Cool. One more thing, no more needs for the overrides. So that whole song and dance of doing like method override, patching, none of that. Rails takes care of it, which is great. We're gonna use seeds. We've done seeding, right? But like it nicely exists here. So by default, the DB folder has a seed file. So you can just say what you want, and if there's a command, Rails db seed, that will run this this file and just like seed the database for you Super useful. We may use it today or we may not, we'll see. You remember rake tasks, right? None of that. Now it's Rails tasks. Also, I'm not in the Rails folder, so cd desktop student git 17. Yeah. Wow, I remembered. And this is a list of no, that's wrong. No. Oh yeah, sorry. I did not remember after all. Oh yeah, so that's a list of the tasks you can run. It's the same thing you would have gotten in Rake. So you can see that although we use Rails, the interfaces and the kind of the general attitude is still there. Like barely anything changed. If anything, there's less you have to do, not more. But keep reverting to using Rails for everything. Rails console works the same way as Rake console did. So if I say Rails console, or if you're lazy as I am, you just can say Rails C. We're in Pry. We do not have to set up a Rake file, and the task is just here, which is great. We no more have to use binding of Pry. We don't have to include Pry at all. There's a tool called Bybug, which you've probably seen me type in several times when we worked with Sinatra, or like previously in general, because I got so used to it. Bybug works the same. You just type in Bybug, which is a nice funny name for what you are intending to do, and anywhere in your code, and it's going to stop execution and work as Pry did. Just the word Bybug, nothing more.
You can include a gem, or it comes with you.
Yeah. Something I didn't point out, actually when you generate a new Rails app, it just like automatically bundles everything. One more thing that just happened, and I didn't even notice. So there's a gem file. It's a bit more hefty than usual. You're used to, but unsurprisingly so, I presume. And that's the kind of like general overview. Let's maybe build some stuff to show you how it works. I'm not going to type it out. It's here, so I'm just going to copy things around. So we want a trains controller. I did not generate a controller. I could have, but I'm going to just create it manually. Why not? So controllers, new file, trains controller, RB. Plug that in here. Nothing surprising, right? The only difference between controllers in Rails versus Sinatra is that these don't have any specific verbs. There's no get, post, or whatnot, right? So controllers now in Rails will only know about what to do, not when, right? Because in Sinatra it was when there is a get to this route, do this, right? In Rails it's method, just a method in a class, nothing else. So the trick here is that there's some black magic regarding routing. But before we do that, I'm gonna get some templates. That's gonna be train name. Oh, that's weird. Anyway, that's a template for a show page for a train. So I'm gonna create that too. Same thing. I also created trains directory in views, and I say new HTML ERB. Plug it in here. Also, nothing you wouldn't see previously, apart from this little bad boy here. So let's start with this. Also, that's not new, that's show. That's show. New actually looks a bit differently. Oh, I don't have a new. This is an index page, so get rid of that. Index HTML ERB. We don't have a new because forms in Rails are a completely separate lecture. There's a lot to talk about because there's very little to type. You will see that in Rails in general. The less you have to type into Rails, the longer it will take me to explain it because it does so much for you that it will be irresponsible of us to like just tell you, oh, that's how you do it. Goodbye. But anyway, so this is all familiar to you, right? This is an index page for all the trains. I just go over trains and get some links. You don't know how that works yet, but like, fret not. So just generate some links to trains, and that's the show page. It has a like link to go back, right? None of that is going to work. Why?
routes config.
There's no routes. There's no way to know what to do when. You can say routes. It's fine. It's just like, as I said, I say routes because this is different in computer science. Root refers to upload directory of a file system. That's why I say root. That's why I say routes. Cool. So none of that will work because there's no routing in place. There's no way to say, hey, because think of a web application as a big fat function that its input is via the URL or the params you send, right? Like nothing else. So we don't have a way to get input. There's no configuration for any routes. And that's what we're going to do now, which I will graciously copy quickly here. We don't need that comment. And look at that. This is like mind-blowing. Boom. So I would like a route for trains, for a method called index, and for a method called show. Save it. Now let's go to this console thingy and say Rails routes. Lo and behold, there's a get for trains, and there's a get for trains ID. And that also knows that it should go to the trains controller and run the index method, and for the show page, go to trains controller and run the show method. And that actually, Paulo, I've seen your hand, just a second. And that actually matches. There's an index and a show. Also, I don't mention any templates. You know why? Because there's a trains controller, and there's a trains views folder, there's an index view, and there's an index method in the controller. So if I don't mention anything, that method is gonna go looking for the index file in the trains folder for the index method. You see how much implicitly happens? Like there's so much implicity that happens here that if you haven't done that with Sinatra previously by hand, that would just go over your head. You'd be like, you could learn it, right, and like make a website, but you would not understand a single thing about how it works. So once again, you say routes, you say, I want to set up resources for trains. This is the name of the model, but I don't want all 7 of them. I just only want one for index and a show. And that generated the routes. Now the application is able to realize if you go to /trains, it will know to go to the trains controller and go to index. It knows how to find the controller because the controller is actually called trains controller. If I misspell it, it's not going to work. So like every single thing in your Rails application, if you want to use all of its abilities, is just up to naming things correctly, and that's how Rails will like find its way. So Paulo, your task.
Oh, it was just because in labs you also do like resources only, set up 2 of them, but can't you just do resources and set up all of them at the same time?
Yeah, but I don't need them.
But yeah, that's my point.
So I can't.
They'll be empty, but you won't be able to get them because you haven't set up the controller methods.
Okay, so I'm a user of your app, and you only prepared for having views for index and show, and I'm going to start going to pages that will just give me errors. Let's put it that way.
Won't it give you a not found error anyway?
Well, I mean, yeah, but like, anyway,
Okay.
don't do that. Don't do that. Do only what you need to have. Rosen?
Yeah.
Mine was some of the labs that driver methods in the controller.
Oh, you'll see them. Don't worry. Where was I going? Let's run the thing. Let's see where we're at. So you run it by saying Rails S, or if you're not lazy, you say Rails server. But that gives you a chance to misspell something. Also wears down your keyboard. S is enough. So now we're running that. Version 3, this is Puma, this is a server. Previously it was Shotgun. Now it's nice because it's very funny. Version of Puma is 3.12, codename Llamas in Pajamas. Anyway, we're running on 0.0.0.3000, which is our local host. And, pending migration error. By the way, this is a Rails error screen. It's like the best thing ever. It tells you exactly what happened. It shows you all the information you may need. There's no response because like nothing really happened. Tells you what the error is, where it happened, and most importantly for me, it gives you an interactive console here. Like train.all is not going to work because there's no migration yet, but this is the actual console, one you will run in a terminal. So if it says I have pending migrations, right? I'm going to do Rails db migrate. Maybe I can't do a migration from here. Let's check. Rails db migrate. Yeah, sorry. That's gonna interact with the app, so it knows about active record and everything else. But if you want to do some system work, you still have to go back to the terminal.
Was that just at the bottom page? You just scroll
Yeah,
down?
no, that's part of the website. It's not. It's in the browser.
Okay.
Anyway, I've run the migrations now, so if I refresh that, we're up. It works, right? Remember, I have a /trains thing that shows all trains, none. Currently, I have a show, no trains, so sucks. So I'm gonna say Rails C, which stands for console, and I'm gonna create some trains. Give me a name for a train.
Choo-choo.
I had to.
Scotsman. Oh,
So Choo-choo and the Scotsman.
Orient Express.
Slowly. My memory is for sure. Choo-choo. Okay, I'm lost. What was it? Derek. It's a nice train name. Who has seen Derek, the show by Ricky Gervais? I actually cried on it. It's so good. Not from laughter. It was very sad, but also it was very funny. I didn't know Ricky Gervais has enough humanity in him to like pull this off. So, anyway, so now we have trains, which is nice. Look at how cool this is. That there are links to them, and there's a this is a boo boo. Let me fix that. H1. Yeah, I have to open it. Nice. And there's a link, right? The way that the link works is that you see this is a Ruby tag, right? So we interpolate something and show it. There's a method called link to, right? This is something we call a helper. The first thing you pass into it is what you want to show in the link, right? And the second thing you pass into it is where the link goes to. But this is not a URL. This is a path helper. This is something that Rails internally knows about. So you don't even have to remember what the path for trains is, because Rails will know that for you.
You just run train path and you know directly.
I mean, trains path, so the index page. If you want to figure out how this thing works and where it comes from, you say Rails routes, right? And you can see that the get to all the trains that goes to trains index has something called a prefix. And it has a prefix trains. So trains within Rails application will mean the address of all the trains. So if you say trains_path, it's going to give you the URL itself. So, so look at that. Let's make an error, right? I can't do that here. So sorry, it will work only in link 2, because that I think lives in the controller. So ignore that. That experiment is cancelled. The way this works, if you look into, let me see if in my README I have something. Yeah. So I've shown you this this hotshot way of defining the routes, but you could do that as well pretty manually by doing so, like that. It's going to do the same thing, right? But in here you have to manually define the helpers, the prefixes, the aliases you may, and then just stick to them in link helpers. I tend not to do it if I do just RESTful routing, because why would I do it? I'm going to leave it commented out here and leave that as is. But this is possible. And also the link that this file gave you, routing from the outside in, you can explain everything. So I don't want to sound ignorant or arrogant, but like, why would I explain stuff to you exactly if there's that website, right? I want to show you the big picture, the broad strokes. This is also the part of the general narrative arc of this bootcamp, that as you go deeper into the program, the more responsibility on you is to figure out the tiny bits of information, right? We're going to lead you through the path, like we're going to show you the direction, but like the tiny decisions, like you should take more and more of them, right? So you're getting more and more independent, you're able to understand and read documentation and so on and so forth. So transition from Sinatra to Rails is that first moment where I go like, oh, you don't know how to do that? Well, there's a website, go look it up. You know what to do, you know what you want to achieve. Sinatra taught you the methodology, Sinatra taught you the goals of building a web application. Rails is going to do the same. But how? I mean, I'll show you some broad strokes, but there's so many details, you just have to go here and look it up. Nonetheless, continuing with the explanations that I've promised not to give you, the link to helpers are, once again, as I said, built on the premise that the first argument is what the links say, and the second is where the link goes. So this is not too flashy. Trains path to all the trains, which would be what? /trains. Fine. Let's go look at it. Inspect. You can see ahref /trains. Right? That's kind of like nah. You would expect that. What's really cool about it is that on the index page, we created a link to train.name, which is the name of the current train that we're taking from the array of trains, and then we just say train, not even path. I'm using train as a variable I've put here, so Rails will know, since that train comes from all the trains, it knows it's an active record thingy, and it's going to take its ID and construct the path to it itself. Which is pretty sick. Look at that. Trains 1, trains 2, trains 3, trains 4.
But if you make a spelling mistake,
And you know what's funny? Did you mean train? Like it actually is smart enough in many cases to be like, I know what you had to type. Got your back. So it's pretty cool, right? So Rails is nice like that, but it's its biggest advantage, also its biggest danger. Because like there's so much stuff going on here that you don't see, that's easy to lose track of actually understanding what it's doing. So you have to be very, very vigilant, I'd say, and like explore a lot. If you see any new thing that you did in Rails, immediately go to the documentation and read about it.
Just for that, so on link to, say we want to learn more about link to, where do we go to our website?
Can I be snarky? I will be snarky anyway. Sorry. No. LMGFI. You know the website? Let me Google that for you. That's my general advice. Like, if you want to go on Rails guides and like click through it, without being snarky, that's the real answer. If you want to click through it, I hate doing that because like it takes so much time to like figure out what I wanna find. So I go on Google and say Rails guides link to, right? And I include Rails guides because it can take me anywhere in the world, but I want to go to guides within Rails. Routing from the outside in. Okay, maybe that has stuff in it. So I press Command and F, bring up this little bad boy here, and I say link to. 7 matches. Sounds good. Bam. 1 example, 2, 3, 4. Like this. Essentially, that website has just like 100 of examples for like everything it does. So. Also, continuing on the snarky off topic, who doesn't know that website? Okay, so it bears. Let me Google that for you. So you can, if someone asks you a question that you think they should have Googled, you say, for example, I don't know, how to brush teeth, and you click preview, and that's what you send to them is this. They're gonna open the website, and that's what they're gonna see. It's very good. It's very good. And now when that person actually clicks here, it gives you the hey. So if you want to be really like, yeah, that's the peak of SaaS on the internet. And that's really all I wanted to show you today. Let me Google that for you being the top thing. But in general, you're going to Google a lot. Also, I suggest, well, I hope you don't mind, because I didn't mean to like make fun out of you. But it was a great opportunity to plug MGFI. Rails does so much for you. And as I've been, repeating that for the last about 45 minutes, it's super dangerous. So anything that you see happening in Rails in a lab or in a lecture or whatnot, if you don't know what it is, firstly ask me. Then I'll tell you where to Google for it, but also Google for it a lot and make sure you understand what's happening. My best, like if I were to give you one tip about like how to approach that, is that, for example, you've been building that index page and you came up with this, you're proud that it works and happy, right? And you go to the thing and you click through it and it just works and it's so exciting. Please do always open up the console and look at what is generated. Because don't forget that it's just HTML at the end of the day, and it just has put some HTML out for you. And we're gonna do a bit more complex stuff, like we're gonna do checkboxes and select things and forms and whatnot. And they're gonna be so small like this. Like a form to generate a new thing in Rails is like, if it has one property, that form is like 4 lines of code. And that same form, you plug into the edit path and it does the edit thing. Also, no changes to the form itself. So there's so much magic that if you're not checking often what it generates, you'll have no idea how to debug it if it goes wrong. But we're going to talk about it all next week. I mean, by all next week, I mean until the code challenge. What we have in program for learning Rails is how to handle forms with associations, and that's all, really. Because like the goal of the challenge in Rails is that you understand how to set up an app. Well, you won't have to, but like I want you to, and create stuff with associations. So something we've done in the review today in Rails. So I'm just gonna like have you memorize a couple helpers and build a couple forms. But as I said, don't underestimate it, because like so much work that goes into like getting it.
Is it 90 minutes?
It's longer, yeah. Any questions about the intro? Same thing, different stuff, a different tool, a bit more deep. That's all. The rest of the day, go get cracking on 7Cs. Was it released already? Yeah. Bless you. And yeah, we're gonna have the feelings at some point in the evening, but that's the plan for today. Thank you very much.